Oh, by the way, Zach, I'll tell you later.
All right, I think we're live on Facebook now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Miller. I'm the Volunteer and Community Engagement Manager for JustDane. It's JustDane's mission to help transform individual lives and social systems to create a just and equitable community. Welcome to the fourth session of our 2022 Just Conversations series. We've envisioned this series to engage our community in discussion around important, timely issues that affect us all. Our hope is to keep the sessions in more of a conversational format and focused on creating solutions as opposed to restating the problems. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. And we'd also like to express our gratitude to CUNA Mutual Group for their generous sponsorship of our 2022 Just Conversation series. Just some logistical items. We're streaming this live on JustDane's Facebook page. If you're joining us from there, welcome. Feel free to put any questions in the comments. And if you're right here with us on Zoom, welcome. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And at around 7 or so for the last 15 minutes, we'll get to some of those questions from the audience that haven't been addressed yet. So tonight we are honored to welcome Naomi Kowles to the conversation. Naomi is the lead investigator for WISC-TV and collaborated with our own Just Bakery lead instructor, Zach Wisniewski, on a story that we're going to be delving into in more detail tonight. Also joining the conversation is JustDane's peer support coordinator, Janie Osejo. And I'm going to now pass it off to Just Bakery program coordinator, Jacqueline Eitrim, who will be facilitating the discussion tonight. Jacqueline?
All right, thank you, Laura. So tonight we're talking about the long-standing effects that media articles can have on people's lives, and especially when we're talking about people who are justice involved and looking at, even without being convicted of crimes, how that can still paint them in a different picture than who they really are, and can interfere with their ability to kind of move on and do something different. So as Laura had said, we come together from an article that Zach and Naomi had collaborated on together. So I wanted to start with Zach in case anyone watching has not read that article or watched it, which you should. But Zach, can you tell us a little bit about your story and what brings us here tonight?
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Zachary Wisniewski. I'm actually the lead instructor at Just Bakery for 4 years now, but that was not exactly the story that I'm here to tell tonight. My story is a lot different. I kind of was just having a weird teenage years in and out of jail, you know, not doing the right thing, meeting the wrong people, and making like a lot of escalated decision-making choices that weren't on the right path. But by the time I could actually catch up with what I was doing, I was already involved with some of the wrong people, and clearly some of the wrong people who were willing to just, you know, throw my name out there for whatever. What kind of led to the whole experience was I actually had a whole investigation into me, and some charges brought onto me. But during the whole thing, which the part that never gets talked about, was there was actually small little changes that were happening. I was actually going to rehab, and I was actually not even at the residence during some of this period of time that they claimed that they were investigating me. And so it's none of the pieces started to kind of add up. And I realized that after I was already in jail, it was kind of too late to go back on that. I'm sobering up and seeing this and being ugh, that's what I have to live with. But it wasn't until I actually got out and got the job with Just Bakery that I started to learn to advocate for myself. And there was a chance, I don't know if it was, I think it was Spectrum News in Milwaukee. They had an opportunity to come down to Just Bakery and talk to me. And that really sparked my interest in just, talking about what had happened. But that's what kind of got to the conversation. Was I did that article and one other article. And whenever I looked myself up, those articles weren't the first thing to come up. It was all the negative. And that really just for 2 years really struck a nerve in me. And it really made me feel what was the point of advocating for myself and going through all this if it doesn't actually, show up or mean anything. And so I got to this, I don't know what what it was. I think I was talking about it in class, and I was like, yeah, like, look, and I just looked myself up, and it was like all these negative articles, and I'm like, you know what? I should do something. I should write to these companies and say, like, this is clearly defamation. Like, you're not telling the truth here. That's how I felt, at least. And so I reached out to a bunch of news companies, and yeah, Channel 3000 was very, very quick in responding. I think it was like 15 minutes after I had sent out the email, which was really awesome. But oh, where was I going with that? Sorry. Oh, so that kind of got to the whole conversation, was just that, like, I felt like I was lost in that and that I couldn't do anything, but luckily there was people. So thanks to like Naomi, I was able to actually get my story told, and that's kind of what this whole thing came from, was 5 years in the making of just, you know, a lot of different decision-making choices that kind of led to it. And thank God JustBakery was able to, or JustDane and JustBakery were able to help me advocate and, like, you know, learn to use this pieces for good. So that's kind of what led me here, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. So Naomi, how did you get involved in this issue? And is this something that you had been involved with previously?
Yeah, great question. So just to kind of build, I'm just going to jump right off where Zach left off there. When I first saw his email come into our newsroom, and now for context, I mean, our newsrooms get a couple hundred emails a day, and that's probably a low estimate, to be frank, from all kinds of people. Some of them are angry viewers, some of them are a lot of, you know, some of them are things that just we aren't able to follow up on, or we just simply can't do what they want. But when I try to keep track of those as much as I can, right? Even from things that I know, like, there's nothing to be done that can be done here. I saw Zach's email come in. I read it, and it was clearly a guy who was pretty distraught about, you know, this article. So I looked the article up, and I started looking into his case. I looked up the CCAP history, and basically what his email was saying is, my name is linked to a crime that I was never charged for. And I looked up and I'm like, he's right. What, you know, there's this article out here that is linking him. And to be clear, just to give a little bit of background about how news operates in these situations, right? It's a news station doesn't just create a headline out of nothing. So what had happened back in 2017 was Stoughton Police put out a press release linking him, before anyone was charged, linking him and two others to a crime that was just splashy enough and just stigmatized enough. And there's a whole other discussion there, but it's one of those crimes. It's like, okay, it's a big enough charge that warrants a news article. And because it's police saying it, for really decades, and as long as I understand in the news industry, that sort of thing warrants an article, right? So our web team writes it up, it gets up there, and then it just kind of lives there, right? This is not something that even reporters on. It's something that's written very quickly, put together, just based off of a press release, and then we move on, right? So it's like a few minutes of work, and it impacts Zach's and other people's lives for years. And when I looked at what he was saying, this is a crime I wasn't charged for, it connected in my head to, you know, this other policy that we had put in place last year. So we're going to be talking about two policies today. So starting with the first one, I'll get to the other one later, but we had put a policy in place, our station last year, that we no longer name people who are accused of crimes until they're formally charged with the crime in court. So for people who may not be familiar with the criminal justice system, what happens is police arrest someone based on probable cause, and then they will put the name out there. And for decades, it's been tradition that news then puts the name out there. And based on some really great ethical training that some of our bosses had gotten as different media organizations kind of evolve their understanding of ethics and how we should be reporting on crime, especially low-level crime, we put that policy in place. So I went to my bosses and I'm like, look, this article wouldn't even exist under our new policy. No one would be named, and we wouldn't write a follow-up because the other charges that were, or the other crimes that were charged, were so low level that they wouldn't make the news. And they kind of gave me the green light of like, I'm like, look, I don't know if this guy's going to talk to me. He seems a little upset, but I think we should reach out to him and use this as an opportunity to try and tell his story, right? Like, this is something that's impacted him, and it's a really good opportunity to kind of turn the spotlight on ourselves, right? A lot of people complain that news doesn't turn the spotlight enough on themselves. And frankly, I think that's a complaint that I would get behind. Like, we have to examine ourselves if we're going to have the trust of the public. And I'm really thankful that when I pitched the story, I had so much support in the newsroom. They're like, yes, this is exactly what we're talking about all the time. This is a really good opportunity to highlight this issue. Does that answer your question?
It does, and then some. Now I have so many more questions, but you were talking about how it impacts a lot of people's lives, like we don't even realize. So Janie is also someone who had experiences with the media as well. Could you tell us a little bit about your story, Janie?
Hi, can you all still hear me okay? Okay, so my name is Janie Oseppa, and I happen to be the peer support program coordinator for JustDane. I've been at JustDane for 6 years now. In June, it will be 6 years. My situation is somewhat similar to Zachary, but I also bring in the other end of it, right? The part where Naomi does talk about that there were charges eventually with me. And so in my situation, what happened is I was in jail, and it was traumatizing to see my story and my case and things that were going on basically out of my control happening while I was sitting there, no one really talking to me also, and just going by what is in, a criminal complaint, whatever an investigator or a reporter might be finding, which doesn't always tell, right, all the sides of it. So there was that loss of control, and also knowing that this is happening, which had a deeper impact, right? In that in my situation, there was the possibility that that there was a crime that I was eventually going to get charged for. And even though the original investigation was really severe and really serious, the ultimate charge was not that. But the headlines read they were very drastic. And they were there. And actually, before coming on to this, I did my own little investigation. I Googled myself, because the truth is that everywhere I would go, I would find coworkers who would just be honest and say, I Google everybody when they come in. And the fear I had of like, oh my goodness, not only did I get this job, like crossing my fingers, getting a job in something that my employer at the time really took the time to understand what my situation was and still hired me. And I was there for a number of years, and I did a great job. But then to find out that coworkers, and that's just the truth. I'm gonna be honest, I walked in where I'm at the Zoom meeting, and the first thing I see is people on computers looking up recent cases. And I know there's some big news out there. There's a lot of big cases out right now. And it brings back those memories, right? It brings back those memories of there is no control in some ways of what is being told, the narrative that is out there. For me, what happened is I did get charged. And I'm going to be honest, I mean, anyone can look it up, but my charge and the only report that I find connected to whatever investigation there was, I'm going to read you the headline, and it says, "Woman charged for lying about a murder plot under oath." Imagine seeing that, and it's your coworker. Imagine seeing that, and I might be working with you, I might be living with you, I might be anything with you. And what gets lost is all the other good things, right, that I did find about myself. And that is the truth. I mean, there's so many things that come out here that talk about however I was highlighted in different stories, different things that have gone on, different events that I've been part of, even before, right, before my being just as involved. And that's what you're left with. That title. And even for me, it's very hard. Now, ultimately, I did get charged for perjury. There was a lot of things behind there. It wasn't as easy as a lot of people don't understand what situation I was in. They don't understand what even happened, but that's all you read. And it's about a reporter doing their due diligence in finding out what's happening. Now, while I was in prison, I actually got contacted by a reporter. I won't mention their name. And they actually felt like there was a lot more than what was being told in the news. And he wanted to write about the other side of it because he knew there was so many other things going on. And my response to him is, it's not like he wanted to get me out, but he wanted to tell my side of the story. My feelings at that time were I was already traumatized by the whole situation. I was already sitting in prison by this time, something that I had never foreseen and thought would ever happen to me. I was now in a situation where I just wanted to get done with my 2 years and get out. And like I told the reporter, and I love him, and I just said, listen, the reality is that I'm coming back to Dane County, and I don't need another story highlighting anything about me. Like, I just want to be invisible when I come back, and that's already going to be hard enough. And that's what I wanted. And so it's kind of like I do bring in that other side of it, right? Not what quite exact happened to Zach, but what if Zach would have gotten charged with some of that? That's unfortunately all people see. And you know, no, we'll get to this later, but I mean, that's what a lot of people deal with. And we see that over and over. And I get, in the interest of public, I get freedom of speech and all that. But what comes with that is even when I have a good story that was highlighted about me, there's those comments, right, afterwards. And one of the comments said, after reading this, I ran Ms. Osejo's name through CCAP. So no matter what the article highlights that may be good about all this, that I've changed my life, what am I doing now? That is what people go to now. They now go search you on CCAP. They now say, well, you deserve this. You know, all those comments that come along. And so in one way, you'll never get away from whatever people think, whether you were truly charged, whether you were falsely allegated, whatever the issue is. And now I'm left with that, right? So even when a good story came out and I looked at it and I was proud of it, then I have to face those comments and realize, you know what, this is the reality that's out there. And I'm not safe all the time. I luckily work at an agency where we are safe to talk about this, where we're safe to share these things. And I was happy and so glad to see Zach and the news, not only just the article, but the video last week. It was something that I was proud of him. One, seeing Zach as a participant in our programs, coming through, doing something, going down a different path, or maybe a path that he was always meant to go down, and really being, you know, capable of so many things and where he's at now. And that was so proud. I felt so proud, and I had nothing to do with it, but I just feel like that's what we're about. And yet what shades that is the other stuff. And I felt it long ago when I came back 10 years, 12 years ago into this community, and I will never get away like feeling totally safe. But you do get upset. So, you know, that's my story. And, you know, there's some other things I'd like to talk on, but yeah, I just want to say thank you, Zach, for opening this discussion up.
Thank you for saying all that. I'm not crying. It's sand in my eye.
Yeah, thank you, Janie, for sharing. There's a lot of things that you said, but first, don't ever read the comments. Just don't ever read the comments. But a second, something really big that you had talked about is that lack of control. But so many of our participants talk about not really being able to move forward. So even getting help and talking to resource specialists and peer specialists, but every time they have to retell that story, they relive it. And so it's even worse when you're trying to do so many positive things and you look yourself up and you're really excited because this really great story is coming out. And the first thing you see is something from years ago. And I remember seeing Zach so many times do that too and go through it in the classroom, like, oh, they got this article. And then there's just this oh, because I have to scroll through these other ones first before I see this. And it is so hard. And to not even have control over then the narrative you're telling and getting your story out, because everyone's forming their own opinion based on what they're seeing. It's really rough. And Naomi, I think Channel 3000, like seeing some of the other responses from Zach's reaching out, you guys are definitely ahead of the curve when it comes to thinking about this and the impacts that it has. What drove the change for Channel 3000? Why did this become something that they changed the policy on?
No, it's a great question. I think there's a couple parts to this question, right? And it's something that, I mean, we just talked about a lot, right? It's that internet permanency, where if you go back 30 years, when most of our news was consumed through either newspapers or it was still over TV, but TV didn't have like websites that you then also looked up their stuff on, right? So the only way to really look up, say, Zach's history or Janie's history was to go to, whether it's a library or a newspaper archive. It's a very difficult process, right, to go and find that. And so while it's still part of the public record, which is always going to be the job of news organizations, for good or for bad, and that's, I'll get to that in a minute as far as how we have to reevaluate our responsibility to the public record. But as the digital era changed our jobs, I think our industry, and when I say this, this is also the director of journalism ethics at UW saying this in our interview at UW, is the news industry has been slow to keep pace with that, right? As we're learning how to adapt our product to the internet, we didn't really at the same time figure out how to adapt our product to also reckon with, number one, internet permanency, but also public stigma, right? When you go and look at the comments, and frankly, I don't read the Facebook comments on any of my stories either, because they're terrifying. Everybody hates reporters, so if they don't like something in the story, it's going to go in the Facebook comments. And I should probably even share that illustration, because that's nothing compared to what people in those stories are experiencing. So when you read those Facebook comments, I mean, there's a problem with just our culture and how we stigmatize crimes, right? Like, if someone is going to only evaluate a person based on a headline, that's a tough cultural stigma to deal with. And so when you're dealing with both those factors over the past decade, I want to say, and that's kind of a bit of a rough time frame, but there's a number of organizations in our industry, in the media industry, that kind of are the ones pushing the needle on ethics, setting the ethics for us, right? Because news in a democracy is always going to be independent. We don't answer to the federal government. We don't have federal rules or state rules to adhere to. We're all our own independent thing, which I think Zach learned when he reached out to different stations and got very different responses. And so organizations, so things, organizations like Pointer Institute, RTDNA, there's a number of others, names that you probably won't be recognized, but they're responsible for educating our industry, and they a lot of times will set ethics for the industry, right? Or give best standards, best practices, best guidelines. And reckoning with our role in a digital era has become the focus of some of these organizations and also some very large news outlets. So, and again, I might get a little long-winded here and cut me off if I need to, because this is a topic I'm actually very passionate about. There was a podcast that came out in 2017 or 2018, I'd have to double check that year, but from the Radio Lab in New York City. And one of the podcasts they did was with the Plain Dealer, which is the major newspaper in Cleveland, Ohio, and their online outlet is cleveland.com. They, again, a very large regional paper comparable to, say, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in in Wisconsin. They, in 2017, basically did something that no other news outlet was really doing at the time. They constantly get requests like Zach, as every news outlet does. They're like, there's this old 10-year-old article about me. It's damaging my entire life. What do I do about it? And after a couple of years of talking among themselves and figuring out, like, what do we do? Because the other problem is our job is a public record, and messing with that can also damage public trust, right? Our job is to basically keep the first draft of history, as we like to tell ourselves all the time. But we also, I mean, we are major news outlets in general are very large, loud, major platforms in the communities that they serve. And what we put out there stays out there. And they basically put a policy out there called the right to be forgotten. That was the name of the podcast. It was the name of their policy. And also we've referenced it a few times in our coverage of this. But they put this policy out here where they provided a metric of when they would remove names from old articles. I highly recommend listening to this podcast for anybody on this call. It's a fascinating listen. And there's a number of people in our newsroom, including our news director, who's kind of the top dog in a newsroom, a TV newsroom, is the news director, Sarah Gray. She had listened to it, our assignment editor, I had listened to it over the past couple of years, and we would talk about it from time to time. TV stations in general are not doing this, but there are some newspapers that adopted this policy since the Plain Dealer, or similar policy. So I cited them in the story. I'm blanking on their names, but a couple other Boston Globe for one, a couple other very major newspapers in the years that followed adopted very similar policies. And the framework can change from outlet to outlet, but basically it's if your record has been expunged, or if it's a very low level crime that we wouldn't report in the first place. There's some other metrics. We will consider taking your name out of an article. There's metrics where they won't as well. And essentially, this is kind of that policy change at the Cleveland Dealer has prompted some just reevaluation, right, in the news industry. Really, organizations like the UWs are, right here in town, the Center for Journalism Ethics, this is something they also talk about a lot. They talk about ethics in crime reporting, right? So kind of on a similar note, the Associated Press, which is a wire service, meaning that their articles can be pushed out to any subscriber of the wire service, which includes Channel 3000 and pretty much any of our news outlets here in town. They're basically the largest news organization in the world. They have a footprint in pretty much every country, including obviously any major city in the United States. And their reporters basically write articles that go everywhere. So when they make a change, it's a really big deal for our industry. Last year, they kind of pushed it a step further. And just to be clear, I'm not aware if they have like a removal policy, but they changed their crime reporting policy to no longer name people in crimes where they wouldn't be doing a follow-up. So that's a big change, because there are so many crimes from press releases, stuff like that, where it gets an initial story, but no follow-up, right? I've heard this complaint from two people on this call, right? Where there's this big initial headline, but there's no effort to go beyond the headline and get the deeper story, to find out what the background is, try and talk to people involved, because frankly, just the deluge of news doesn't make that always possible, unfortunately. And so to try to eliminate some of that, this giant news organization decided, hey, we're no longer naming people in low-level crimes or crimes where we don't have a follow-up. That's a really impactful change. I think I've lost myself somewhere in the talking here, but basically all of this kind of ethical reevaluation in the news industry of how we reckon with our responsibility in the digital era, in the era of internet permanency, has really driven some news outlets to try and evolve their policies to keep step. I think we're going to see more of that over the next decade or so, but frankly, it's going to be a slow change. News outlets change very slowly. The news industry in general, because as the keepers of history, unfortunately, we also change slowly. And it's something that I frankly am really proud of our station for doing, because this is not, we're a much smaller outlet than is normal to make this type of policy change. As far as I'm aware, I think we're the only one doing this in Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin. And it's something I'm proud of. We take ethics seriously, but quite frankly, there's much more to be done. There's a lot more to reevaluate. There's a lot of other ways where reporters and news industry can be looking at ourselves to determine how do we basically report with least harm, right? Fill our responsibility to the public, but do it while minimizing harm to everybody else.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really great points in there. I know you thought you got lost. You didn't. It followed all very well. So
I can get very ranty when I talk about this. Just us kidding, my colleagues.
So one of the things that I had kind of looked at, and it goes with that, because it seems like there's not a nationwide set. So one of the things is kind of the definition of defamation, because I noticed looking that up, nationwide, we don't have like a set, there's not really regulations around it in every state. And so I'm curious how the industry would define defamation, because it seems like this would qualify being something that really has this negative impact on people's lives moving forward. But for it to just becoming and Wisconsin's one of them that has defamation regulations. So it's just, I'm curious kind of how media tackles that, and how, like, what's the line there? What is defamation versus not defamation?
It's an excellent question. I need to preface my response with I am not a lawyer. That would, the very specifics of that question would have to go to a media lawyer, a legal lawyer, or legal, wow, words today. Here's what I would say though, from what I understand of defamation and basically how media goes about that. Number one, again, this started, I can't emphasize this enough because this does play into the story here, is this did start with a police press release. That puts, frankly, the responsibility of releasing that name is on them, not on media, because law enforcement very often fuels the information that fuels stories. Now that is a whole conversation, right? Especially after the George Floyd murder, where it was very clear with their initial press release they put out that it did not line up with what had actually happened based on the conviction there. This is also an evolving storyline in media, is how much weight do you give police, especially in like breaking news situations or situations where they're the only one that is releasing information about this. But there's no legal base. Again, can't preface this enough. I'm not a lawyer, but there isn't a legal basis for defamation when it's coming from that kind of source. And as I understand it, please go look me up on this. Please don't quote me on this. Again, not a lawyer, but defamation and those types of lawsuits or those types of laws apply when it's intentional, right? If we have information about Zach or anyone else that we know is contrary to the information we're putting out there, I think that's the simplest I can explain it. And I apologize, I do not have a deeper answer on that again, but I can't legally get into that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Because like I said, it was just that line there, and I wasn't sure really what that was. And I think you're right. That's one of the things I had written down is are the police still doing the same thing and doing these press releases? Because if that opens up the door then for media outlets to be reporting on it, it is exactly what you said. It goes right back to that. So what kind of responsibility should be going to the police and making sure that they're not putting out these reports that are impacting people? It doesn't matter if they did something or not, like until it's innocent until proven guilty. So like to be putting the names out there, it's bad news. Not bad news for them.
Bad news. Liked it.
So one of the things that Zach had mentioned, and I think it's important to kind of talk about too, is people getting the power back and finding their voice. And so Zach had mentioned last week, I don't even know, it's Wednesday, last week, about his voice. And like we've had other participants who have come through, and the media can have such a huge impact on how we view ourselves and how our participants have. And there was one woman who had come through our program, and when she came in, she just was so destroyed. She said every time she tried to apply for a job, find an apartment, do anything, people would Google her name and see a crime that she had not been convicted of yet. And because of the crime itself, they wouldn't hire her, they wouldn't give her a job. So she's homeless, she can't find a job, and it's looking bad for her court case as well, because they think that she's not doing these things, when really it's this media outlet that she has no control over it. And when she came in, she assumed that we had Googled her. Like there was just this, oh, well, you already know me because I'm all over the news. I'm like,
I had no idea.
Yeah, like I did not know anything about this. And it was just really wonderful to see this growth. So something that we try to do is really give that power back through our program, through the peer specialist, and through giving people a chance to advocate for themselves and tell their story as they want to tell it. And it's been great to see her transformation over the years now. After making it through ours, she continued working with different JustDane programs, and just who she is now. Like she has a voice. I didn't even know she could talk this loud, but she has it, and she is telling her story, and she is using her experience to really change other people's lives. And it's so different from the woman I met when she came in that door. And so I think that really pops for me as this huge effect that the media really can have on people's lives and the way that they view themselves. Because if you view yourself in this negative way, that's how you're going to project that to the world and feed that image. So that was just my little spiel. I know, Janie, you work around or with peers through the peer specialist program too. Have you seen different effects of the media on their lives?
Right. So I have the privilege of doing intakes with individuals that are currently in the Dane County Jail. Some are there on PO hold, some are sentenced to jail, some are in the process of still dealing with open charges and so forth, right? And during COVID, those intakes are done by the phone. And I can't tell you how many times, and this happened last week too, where this individual said, I don't know what I'm coming out to. My name is all over the news. And, you know, and in his case, he feels that there are allegations and, you know, and how do you support someone through that? And so he was really struggling through that. And for those of you that are not aware of how peer support works, peer support is basically an individual, in our case, through the state of Wisconsin, the certification for peer specialist is somebody that has been, has had some, mental health and or substance use challenges. And in our case, we also hire peer specialists who have obviously been just as involved. And so even though my job that day that I was talking to this individual wasn't to provide support, there was no way I could complete an intake when his concern is, what am I coming out to? I had a great job. What is my boss thinking? You know, all these things that are going on. And then it turned out like he just had a PO hold because some of the charges were dismissed. And so now he's dealing with having been picked up. There were all these charges, whatever was made or agreed, you know, are no longer there, and he's not being convicted of them. And his fear was, what are people going to think about me? And I hear that over and over. And even for some individuals that are charged, that do have that crime, that were convicted, it's the same feeling. I think what I've seen lately, and this is a controversial thing, it will always be controversial, is we have been seeing individuals that have been out in the community. They have not reoffended, but they're out in the community and they happen to be sex offenders. And I've seen lately a lot of the police district put releases on their website saying there's this individual, and they have basically their whole story and then links to some of those news articles out in the news, or a link to their CCAP automatically. Now, I understand, and I'm not going to get into the whole sex offender controversy and how people feel. I understand both the safety concern but we also, the reality is there are individuals in the community with us. We have worked with some of these individuals that, like I said, have been out there. Now, because of this re-release of whatever information that the police decide to put on there, and I've never seen a release that long and so explicit about charges that happened so long ago. Again, and then we've seen 2 of our participants be highlighted this way. So even if it's not getting bigger, it could create a news article. It could create a highlight of that press release, which could cause issues for individuals that are out there. That's one segment of individuals that we work with, that happens all the time. We have individuals that have committed what's considered a sex offense maybe 20, 30 years ago, that came out after doing 25, 30 years ago, 20, 35 years of incarceration in some manner. And they're coming out and they're different individuals. And they're still being, you know, highlighted in other ways, whether it's the news, whether it's the police, there's some kind of highlighting of this. For people that are in jail, even though there might be small cases, you'll see them. You'll see there was a robbery, there was a disorderly conduct. Depending on how the story got to whoever did it and why they decided to tell that story. In our case, what we see a lot, and we've had this discussion even in our agency, is the way that even individuals are being, am I still here?
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
apologize. I'm at a computer that turns off, or the screen goes dark. Anyhow, I'm so sorry about that. But and I kind of lost my track. We're seeing individuals also that if they happen to be in the news or an article, their race and their name comes out. If someone is of a different race, their race is not highlighted, nor is their name highlighted. So there's all these other issues that are coming about, and it's about whose story gets told and how it's told. And again, it comes back to the narrative. Our role at JustDane is basically, how I helped that individual last week was really struggling, is I basically told my story. And there is some trauma, even re-traumatization. I'm being re-traumatized every time I tell my story. That 2 days ago, I had a dream that I happened to be picked up. I went back to prison. I happened to find myself in a prison riot. Why I had those dreams, I don't know, but there is a lot that goes on for those of us that are just as involved. In us trying to support someone by us telling our stories, it's meant to support them and really let them know, hey, we're not like everybody else. For us, you having a particular background or an involvement in the justice system actually means that we can probably help you. As individuals start to trust us and know that some of us have been through those experiences ourselves and have move forward in many ways, even if I can tell you I have it, it really means a lot. So I just wanted to say that I'd like to, say that there's a deeper impact, whether you've committed the crime or not, who you are, what race you're from, and what the narrative is out there. And it really does a lot of damage to individuals. And we are not miracle workers. All we sometimes do is support people and let them know that we believe their story and how they're being perceived. And it is a big deal when someone walks in through our doors. It means that they really need the support. And so I got support at our agency too. And it was really what kept me going. If it wasn't for agencies or other individuals that I know that have gone through the same thing, I don't know where I'd be. So I think these services are crucial. I think it's important to tell the story. It's important that we get ourselves out there. I'm very terrified to do this live feed, but I also feel like Zach, at some point, I have to share my story for those individuals that don't have a voice and feel like they can't tell their voice and will never say anything. And if I have to put myself out there, that's why I'm doing this. I really am. This is not a topic that I want to hash up again because of, like I told you, just people will go look at me differently now, and it hurts. It really hurts. So.
Well, I'm glad you did it with me, so I appreciate it.
So Zach, after going through this process, how do you feel about things now, and what are you hoping to see for the future?
I'd say before all of it happened, I definitely didn't feel as freeing as I feel now. Like now, it doesn't matter to me as much. Like I already, like I kind of said this in the original before the article went out. Like I can fight for myself. Like I know what I did and what I didn't do. But the other two people in that article are no longer around to tell their story, and that's just like, to me, that's what was like another part that was really hard. So like I'm appreciative of it all. And at the end, I can sit here and be like, yes, like this is my side of things. But I was gonna do that either way. So like it was more for everybody else, and I in a weird way, I'm cool with being the face of of like that and that movement or whatever, and just trying to help other people advocate for themselves, because it is something that I remember. Like, this is just a story I'm gonna say real quick. I remember, so I didn't really talk to my family a lot at that time, but I was in jail, right? So like the only number I can remember is my mom. I call her and I didn't even know I was on the news yet. I call her and she's just like not like 5 words. It was like, you saw the article, and then, or like saw the news, and then just like hung up. And I was just like, what? Like, I hadn't even known anything yet. But yeah, so like it was definitely a huge shift, but now obviously that's not how it works, and I have like my voice back, and my family knows who I am, and everyone around me knows who I am. So like, yes, I'm appreciative of it, but it's more for everybody else that's out there that needs, their story heard. And I hope that that's kind of what the point of it would be, is that everyone, feels like, okay, if he can go out there and say that this charge wasn't like actually what it was, then I feel like other people can as well. So I think I've answered that.
Yeah, and it actually leads me to something I had been wondering from Naomi as well. So Zach took the initiative and reached out, right? Like, he did that. With the new policy change, did Channel 3000, did they go through any previous articles and kind of see how those cases went? Or is it kind of up to the individual to reach out and be like, hey, this isn't accurate?
That's an excellent question. And unfortunately, what I have to tell you is our staff is far too small, and that would take, we're talking probably tens of thousands of articles that have gone up on Channel 3000 and any other site like this. So unfortunately, there's no way that an outlet as small as ours has the manpower to do that, which it does leave the burden on the person to reach out and say, hey, do I qualify for name removal? And that's something, unfortunately, we can't help. I will say, the newspaper that actually started all of this, a much larger newspaper, much larger staff, for those resources. So about 2 years after they put their initial policy in place, they were at, I believe, and again, I'm paraphrasing their article, but they found like a tech solution where, and they also, I believe, dedicated some staff to going back proactively through old articles to see what would qualify for removal. I think they had some high level tech help that wouldn't be available to us with that, because it's just, unfortunately, I can't even explain just how massive a task that would be, or how many months, if not years, of just dedicating to that would take. But that was one thing they recognized in their follow-up article. They're like, so many people don't have the resources, or even may not be aware, or maybe they don't have internet access, right? Or maybe they don't have this or that other way to contact us. We'd love to be able to help them. We're able to do that. Unfortunately, that's not something we can do right now. I would love it if we could. I know that's not the answer that I'd like to give, but
Sounds like a new job description.
Yeah, and I think it is
Hire
important.
me.
I think it's important that people know too that they can reach out to the news places. Although I do find it very interesting that you guys, being so small, were able to address this very quickly and do all kinds of stuff, when some of the larger ones that Zach reached out to, they put it on him. They're like, you prove to us that you didn't actually get convicted. CCAP, you have access in Wisconsin. We know it's problematic, but it's there. But to then expect someone who's been through this and who you're kind of dragging through the mud over and over again with these articles, you're like, no, you prove to us that you're innocent. You're like, I am. It's on there. You have access. So I'm very happy that you guys are changing this policy and really taking the steps and recognizing what a huge impact this has on people's lives and why it's so important.
Yeah, I think the only say, I'm not going to reference other outlets. I don't know what their internal newsrooms looks like. I will just say again, and what I said before, and I wasn't told to come on here and tout Channel 3 or anything else, but look, these are baby steps. These do not address every issue I've heard in this call, and that's a much longer process, and it's much larger industry process. That being said, our management and our newsroom, we have a lot of good people. Other newsrooms do too. I'm not sitting here saying everyone else is bad and we are good. Please God, that is not what I'm saying. But the re-examining ethics and trying to get a good look at what our coverage, the harm, the impact, everything has to do with that. You can't do that without the backing of management that is willing to take a hard look at that. And quite frankly, in my experience, that's not a common thing in news management. reporters like myself, again, I'm not at the top of the totem pole. Reporters like myself can have all kinds of ideas of what this or that we want to change, but you need management backing, and that's something we have here. That's something we want to, that's something we prioritize.
And I think that's huge. So we're working on a sort of curriculum called the Just Workplace. And one of the things that we talk about is that it has to be a priority. You have to really care, because it's not an easy process and you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks. But when you make it a priority and you have the backing and it's part of your vision, your mission, your values, that creates the environment where you'll put this kind of work first. And I think that's just, it's so important. So thank you. Do we have any questions, Laura?
I don't have a question or answer, but what I will say is, in looking at my own stuff, I do see a lot of those previous, like I mentioned before, articles or any links to any investigation are pretty much gone. They have to, for people looking up, they have to look up through another person that was connected to the whole situation. And so as far as I feel like there was some justice, because there was a whole bunch of other stuff going on that people realized after the fact. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I think there was a lot of good people that started realizing, you know, even though there's that one, the rest are gone. So that helps. But the reality is there's still a lot of things. And I think one option for people, if they're listening and they have been in the system, you know, to go to the expungement clinic. A lot of those arrests, even though they might be false or they didn't lead to a conviction, you can get those taken off of your record and so forth. I've done that, and I'm going after hopefully my pardon. And part of that process is to look at those things. That's my remedy for myself, but like for Zach or any other person, even if you were investigated, it never led to those charges, you can get taken off. And so little by little, there's some more remedies that people can do for themselves to get those taken off. Not off of CCAP right now, but taken off of your other record that is run when they start running other things. Unfortunately, CCAP in the state of Wisconsin is unfortunately used in many ways and not always for good, right? So.
Doesn't offer much information anyway. Like CCAP is a terrible source of information. It's like it gives you titles, and unless you actually know the details, you have no idea what the stuff means. And I think that can be so detrimental too. And also not getting people's names right, or not putting in a birthday, and then you get somebody else who's not even the same person and start holding them toward, and they're like, I've never even been arrested. What are you saying? I have this. So it's a lot. And CCAP is one of those things that it needs a little bit of refinement and change to it. Is that the expungement clinic?
Yeah, I just threw that in the chat. That's one, and there's one coming up May 21st, this Saturday. So if anyone is interested in that. So please, if you're on our call, you can feel free to, you know, put your microphone on and ask the question in person, or put it in the chat. We don't have any coming in yet. I guess I would maybe have a question if I can start out. I'm wondering, Naomi, like, you know, Janie talked to this, as you said, could be a whole different conversation, but as we start talking about how the news describes people in their stories, I'm wondering if there is like a template or like a certain vocabulary guidelines that y'all use, and if that is ever changing, and what is that based on?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you're asking that, because that's one I wanted to touch on. And I want to clarify first, specifically, are we talking about how different people can be described? Sometimes a race is included, sometimes not.
Yes, I think, you know, I've also seen sometimes the the way that people's ages are connected with race too. And yeah, but mainly
No,
those, yeah.
that's an excellent question. And that is another one of those things. Again, I think I feel like I'm harping on saying the same thing over and over again. It's one of those things that news is starting to reevaluate, because like every other industry, there is implicit bias issues in how news organizations have historically framed certain things or covered certain things. And it's something that's being reckoned with. In terms of, is there a style guide, right? So I mentioned the Associated Press earlier. Or AP shorthand, that's what I'm going to call them in a second. But the AP, there are AP guidelines basically set the writing and style guidelines for news organizations everywhere. So I think there's another style guide that some follow, but AP is the most common. A quick notation to that: just because a style guide exists doesn't mean that every single person writing the news is fully briefed on that style guide. I mean, if you all remember back to like college style guides when we were writing our papers in college, I didn't know half of that. But anyway, I'm about to rabbit trail there. That style guide is constantly updating, and I have watched them address issues like this, right? They have, for example, their response in the last few years, especially, I'm seeing a lot of changes in how we talk about transgender people, how we talk about anyone in the LGBTQ community, how we talk about race, how we talk about things like that. It is an evolving guideline. It's one that's being evolved to kind of match where the culture is moving. That being said, there are still, and I can't really speak to a specific instance because I'm not exactly sure specifically like where race is used or where not. But I mean, it does bring to mind, for example, we all probably have heard about the tragic shooting in Buffalo. There was an issue with one very large national news outlet, which it was someone, I don't remember who did it, but they basically took the shooting. They're like, they took the description of the shooter and compared it to how a shooter of a different race was described somewhere else. And same exact age, one was Black, one was white, one was described as a teenager, one was described as a man. They were both 18 years old. And it is small, but extremely important things like that news organizations haven't always, again, there is sometimes this implicit bias that dictates how it's written that we can only really clean up with constantly putting it out there, looking at how we can do better, things like that. And I suspect that this issue, for example, whether a race is named at all, I believe, if I recall correctly, the context was in sex offender publications required under law. I think that was the context mentioned in that. Again, without looking at an example, I can't speak to that specific issue. But I think, I guess my shorthand answer to this question is, yes, news organizations are examining implicit bias because, yes, that does drive some of that at times. And it's, again, I mean, racism is not always intentional, and sometimes that happens unintentionally. But it needs to be called out when it happens. I think that's what's happening here. And it is something that style guides like the AP, which set style for pretty much all news organizations, are pretty proactively, credit to them, working to address as kind of the issues come to light, if that makes sense. Does that kind of answer the question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's unfortunate that there's such a reluctance to change to, like, especially some of the organizations that have been around for so long, because to have this and to know, like, they should know, right, that that's not how they should be doing it, but because it's how they've always done it, that's how they're going to continue to do it until someone comes in and is like, no, you can't do it like this anymore. I think it's just unfortunate that there seems to be this roadblock of progressing and making these changes and understanding the, again, impact that we're having on human beings' lives with these. And they might seem simple and small because they're not affecting you, but these words have power and they have meaning and they do affect people's lives. So I'm hoping we keep seeing news and media and all of this changing for the good and understanding the impact that they have with these. Anyone else have?
100%. Oh, I was just gonna say yes, 100%. I don't have a question, but I have a comment. as of yesterday, I am 100% off. Well, not 100% off, but I no more probation visits, and I am pretty much off of all supervision. So that's a congratulations as well. Yay! Thank you. Woo,
Also, I
woo.
was going to tell you this earlier, I think when we started, and I was like, oh, wrong time. But your article was like one of our absolute highest read that week. And that's a really high bar to hit because typically breaking news is what the most people click on. So
That's awesome.
congrats on
That's
that.
super awesome. I appreciate. I will, and that was another question, not a question, but a comment I was going to say for in general that I noticed, and this might be just because of the different like shift we're seeing. I was explaining this to Jacqueline, and I was saying how back in 2017 there wasn't a lot of when it happened. There wasn't a lot of like other news, like it was all news companies writing articles, but the article that you guys wrote was actually republished like multiple times by different outsourced like blog writers and other like companies. So when I looked myself up, it felt good. It was like good article, and I'm like, it's all the same article, but like it's all good. So it was
That's
cool to
called
see, but also
aggregation,
yeah, and that's just something that's definitely changed, in the years, and I think that's also what kind of adds to it too, is that what kind of like blew it up in a proportion was just more people could see it versus back then it was like you looked that up and it was like NBC, or sorry, I'm not going to name names, but news company, big news company, and it's all like negative. Now you just see like, you can actually read outside of the news and still see the same stuff. So I think that's a big shift too. That kind of helped the positive.
I don't know what it was like in 2017. I was not in the news industry at that time, but news partnerships. So like that article was published on our site, but also, for example, on Fox 47, which is also like a sister station of ours, complex arrangement, but anyway. And we also have like news, we call it like news partners, news aggregation, whatever. Because we're a CBS affiliate, any story I turn can be used by any other CBS affiliated station. Not that they are all the time, but they have like they can access our content. We're sister stations with a place in Milwaukee, so there's lots of opportunities. Again, I don't know this. I frankly can't answer. I don't know if it was different in 2017, but yes, that's interesting. You noticed that, but typically anything we write can be picked up by a lot of other places.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that because like when I looked it up, it was like just major news companies. But then this article, like this most recent one, it was a lot. It was like even in German, there was like a German article one. I was like, whoa, let's go.
Sometimes they're stealing content.
I think they are, and that's okay. Whatever, post it everywhere.
It's fine. As far
Make
as I'm
your
aware,
ad
we're not
revenue.
affiliated with any German outlets.
I don't think so. They're probably just retyping it. I was saying they changed the
Works for
title
me.
just a little bit, right? But whatever. I'll take all positive. Anyways.
So Janie, was there anything that you wanted to touch on before we're kind of approaching our time here?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to really thank, Naomi, Zach, for doing a really good job on highlighting, the other side that we usually don't see, and give people another option to look at, other things a different way, and that people have a voice. They don't all have to go on camera like Zach did, but maybe Zach or any one of us can be a resource to somebody on, and not everything's going to be taken off. It depends where and what, like we said. So I just really appreciate opening and continuing the dialogue that I think at our agency we have all the time. And it's nice to be able to share and let other people know that these are things that truly happen to people, and that it does impact everybody, because we're not alone in this. I have friends, I have families, I have coworkers, I'm in the community, and it does impact how well I'm doing based on what's going on. And as individuals like to say, we want a safe community, our agency does too. And so the more healing and well-being and, reduce harm reduction that we can do in the community, it'd be better for everybody. But if we're not allowing people to heal and overcome some of these and move forward from their mistakes, We're not going to achieve or accomplish what everybody wants at some point. So.
And it was a super awesome article. Like, you guys killed it. I didn't think I was going to be that much of the whole thing. I thought I was going to be like a little snippet, and then it was going to be about the policy, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, mom, everybody, grandma, kid, friends, everybody, watch this now. No, but anyways. It was most watched because I had everybody at my organization watching it. That's probably the
Over
only
and over
reason.
and over again.
Just having them all just watching it and sending it and being like, look.
I'm talking.
I think I
like
watched it like
over
4
10,000
times.
views. So that
Oh,
was
wow, that's
quite a
awesome.
lot.
I
That's so
think it
awesome.
was the reach of our agency's Facebook page that.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Got it
That's
out
what it
there.
was. That's what it was.
I don't remember exactly what it was. Like our digital manager puts out like every week with like the views in our top performing articles. It was like, I think it came in second. I think it was like 15,000 or something. I don't remember exactly.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, I think unless anyone has any questions, I think we can wrap it up. I want to thank you, Naomi, for taking time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to be with us to go further into this. And I also want to, just second what colleagues have said before, but I'm extremely proud to work with you, Zach, and work with you, Janie, and thank you very much for both of you sharing your story to advocate for others. And Jacqueline, awesome job. Thank you so much for facilitating the conversation, and thank you to everyone who showed up to hear about it. So this will be on our YouTube page in whenever I get to it, probably tomorrow. But for now, thank you so much for being here. And I will remind you that we're trying to do a Just Conversations at least quarterly, trying for monthly, but it depends on the topics that come up. But I'm so happy that this one came up at the time that we could address it. So thank you very much, panelists, and thank you everyone for being here. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.